Amarachi stepped out of the house to fetch her clothes, only to her surprise, "Who did this? Who did this to my clothes?" Amarachi cried out in panic. "Something is wrong with my clothes." Her mother rushed outside and gasped when she saw the clothes. Her face turned pale as she touched the fabric and traced the strange symbols on the blouse. "Amarachi," her mother said in a trembling voice, "do you know what these marks mean?" Amarachi nodded slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. I left the clothes outside last night. I didn't think it was important." Her mother's face grew even more worried. "Do you know what this means?" In the village of Kubo, there was a respected rule: never leave anything outside after dark, as witches and wizards would take what they wanted and harm anyone careless enough to forget. The villagers had followed this rule for generations, knowing that the night belonged to the evil forces who roamed the darkness. These witches and wizards lived secretly among the villagers, known for their malicious tricks. They could cause illness, misfortune, and even death for the smallest reasons. Amarachi, a kind-hearted young woman, was about to learn the true danger of breaking this rule. Amarachi was a hardworking woman, always busy helping her family and the other villagers. Her smile was bright, and her laughter filled the air. She was known for her cheerful nature and willingness to lend a hand. However, Amarachi had one weakness: she was forgetful. She often got so caught up in her daily chores and helping others that she would forget little things, like bringing in her clothes before dark. One evening, after a long day of work, Amarachi decided to wash her clothes. The sun was still high in the sky, so she knew the clothes would dry quickly. After finishing her other tasks, she made her way down to the nearby stream to wash her clothes. The cool water felt refreshing on her hands as she scrubbed away the dirt from her fabrics. Amarachi had no idea that this simple act would change her life forever. By the time she finished washing, the sun had already begun to set. She gathered her clothes and hung them on the clothesline, thinking they would dry overnight. By morning, they'll be dry and ready to wear, she thought. But Amarachi was so tired after the day's work that she forgot all about the clothes left outside. The village began to quiet down as night fell, and Amarachi joined her neighbors for a chat, not thinking for a second about the clothes on the line. The villagers of Ogan knew the stories and had heard the warnings from their parents and elders: never leave anything outside at night. They were told that after sunset, the witches and wizards would come out from their hidden places in the village. These evil beings had the power to harm anyone who disrespected the night, especially if they left something outside for them to claim. Amarachi, however, did not heed the warnings that had been passed down for generations. As the night grew darker, the witches and wizards began to stir. They were not ordinary people; they had powers that allowed them to roam the village in secrecy under the cover of darkness. They could slip in and out of homes, causing illness, bad luck, and misfortune wherever they went. The moment the sun set, the night became theirs, and anything left outside was as good as theirs to claim. That night, the witches and wizards were looking for something to use in their dark magic. Amarachi's clothes were the perfect target. These clothes, once fresh and clean, would soon become tools for their evil deeds. One by one, the witches and wizards crept toward Amarachi's clothes. The first witch, dark and sly, approached the wrapper hanging on the line. She raised her hands and touched the fabric with her long, cold fingers. As soon as her fingers made contact, the cloth twisted unnaturally, as though an invisible force was pulling at it. The once soft and clean fabric began to tear, and strange symbols appeared on it. These symbols were no ordinary markings, they were runes, dark and evil, used by witches to inflict curses. The witch smiled as the markings began to spread across the cloth. Another wizard appeared, drawn to Amarachi's blouse. His eyes gleamed with malice as he touched the fabric. The blouse, once bright and fresh, began to wrinkle and distort. The wizard muttered words under his breath, and the blouse started to shimmer with dark energy. It wasn't just marked with strange symbols, it was now cursed. The wizard laughed softly to himself as the blouse became a conduit for his magic, ready to send a dreadful curse to its owner. As the witches and wizards danced around the clothes, the darkness of the night seemed to grow heavier. They surrounded Amarachi's clothes, marking them with symbols and curses, using them as tools to inflict pain and suffering. The fabrics twisted and turned in ways that seemed impossible as the witches and wizards poured their evil power into them. The air was thick with dark magic, and Amarachi's clothes were now bound with a curse that could never be undone. By the time dawn began to break, the witches and wizards had vanished back into the shadows. The first rays of sunlight slowly lit up the village, and the air grew still. The evil magic was gone, but Amarachi's clothes were left behind, marked with wicked symbols and cursed energy. The next morning, Amarachi woke up feeling unusually tired. She stretched her arms and yawned, unaware of the terrible fate that awaited her. She went outside to gather her clothes, expecting them to be dry and ready to wear. But as soon as she stepped into her yard and looked at the clothes, her heart sank. The clothes were no longer the neat, clean items she had washed the day before. The once beautiful wrapper was twisted and torn, covered in strange dark markings. The blouse was no longer bright and colorful but stained with dark symbols that seemed to shift and move. Amarachi's hands trembled as she reached for the fabric, feeling a cold shiver run down her spine. "Mother, come quickly!" Amarachi cried out in panic. "Something is wrong with my clothes." Her mother rushed outside and gasped when she saw the clothes. Her face turned pale as she touched the fabric and traced the strange symbols on the blouse. "Amarachi," she said in a trembling voice, "do you know what these marks mean?" Amarachi nodded slowly, her heart pounding in her chest. I left the clothes outside last night. I didn't think it was important." Her mother's face grew even more worried. "The witches and wizards did this. They came last night, Amarachi. They saw that you left your clothes outside, and they marked them with their dark magic. Anything left outside at night belongs to them. They use it to curse and hurt anyone they choose. And now, they've cursed you." Amarachi's blood ran cold. She had heard the stories of witches and wizards but had never taken them seriously. Now, she knew that the villagers weren't just telling tales. They had been trying to protect her from the evil that lurked in the shadows. The witches and wizards had marked her clothes, and there was no going back. The damage had been done, but that was just the beginning of Amarachi's suffering. As the day wore on, Amarachi began to feel strange. It started with a headache, but it quickly escalated. Her body grew weak, and a fever took hold of her. Her skin burned, and her stomach churned. It was as if something dark and sinister had invaded her very being. Amarachi collapsed onto the ground, unable to move. Her mother rushed to her side calling for help from the villagers. The native healers came quickly, but nothing they did seemed to help. Amarachi's condition worsened by the hour. Her body trembled uncontrollably, and she groaned in pain. The healers were puzzled, as they had never seen anything like this before. They tried herbs, poultices, and even prayers, but nothing seemed to work. Word spread quickly through the village, and the elders gathered. The native doctor was called in to examine Amarachi. After a careful look, he came to a shocking conclusion. This illness is not from nature. It is not a fever or a sickness from the body. This is a curse placed upon her by witches or wizards, the doctor said gravely. The witches and wizards used her clothes to inflict their dark magic. The clothes were the closest thing to her body, and through them, they transferred their curse into her. This illness is their doing. They are punishing her for breaking their rule. The doctor and the healers worked together for several days, using all of their knowledge of curses and magic to reverse the spell. Amarachi's recovery was slow. It took the combined efforts of the healers and a great deal of time before Amarachi's fever finally broke. Her body remained weak, but the curse had been lifted. She was no longer burning with fever, but she had learned a painful lesson. The witches and wizards of Kubo were real, and they had the power to harm anyone who disrespected their rules. Amarachi had made a simple mistake, but it had almost cost her life. From that day on, she never left anything outside at night again. The witches and wizards had cursed her through her clothes, and the memory of that curse would stay with her forever. The villagers, too, became more careful, and the story of Amarachi's ordeal was passed down through generations as a reminder of the power of the evil witches and wizards who ruled the night. Amarachi's clothes were never the same, and neither was she. She had learned that the night belonged to them, and anything left outside would be claimed by the witches and wizards, with consequences that no one could escape. Thank you for joining us on this mystical journey through the village of Kubo, where the boundaries between the ordinary and the supernatural blur. If you enjoyed this tale of Amarachi and the lurking witches and wizards, be sure to give this video a thumbs up, share your thoughts in the comments, and most importantly, subscribe to Niger Trend TV for more enchanting stories and captivating content. Stay tuned for more amazing stories, and remember, every village has its secrets, and every rule has its reason. Until next time, stay curious, stay safe, and never leave anything outside after dark.